Travel's the spice of life, right? However, I tell you this because it is a real situation. It did happen to me very recently. I went to a conference all the way across the country in Southern California, and as a result, I had an experience that I would not wish upon anybody who lives with diabetes. I was 142 going into my sprint. I got to the gate. I had to get on some trams, run around, get onto the airplane, and huffing and puffing look, and I'm like 104 and I'm dropping. And I'm like, this is delightful. Because again, there's not a whole lot you can do to plan for that situation. But what I have to really emphasize is these days happen, these trips happen to all of us at some point. So don't go in expecting the worst. Hope for the best. Know the best is happening, but have your contingency plan in case things do, hit the fan.
Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode.
What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where today I get to tell you about what I would consider, and what you may consider as well, to be a diabetes travel nightmare. I tell you this story not to freak you out, because a lot of people with diabetes already are very nervous about travel. Think about it, right? You're in a new place, you're out of your routine. What if your technology fails? What if your insulin fails? What if you don't know what you're eating? What if there's crazy spontaneous activity? There's a million things why, that could make you nervous. There's a million reasons why you could feel like this is a very stress-inducing event, when the reality is it's supposed to be time to relax and chill, and ultimately, at the very least, enhance life. Travel is the spice of life, right? However, I tell you this because it is a real situation. It did happen to me very recently. I went to a conference all the way across the country in Southern California, and as a result, I had an experience that I would not wish upon anybody who lives with diabetes, but I want to share it with you to, number one, share the reality of what can happen, but number two, and more importantly in this situation, give you a look into how my brain navigated these situations, so ideally you can avoid having to deal with them. And if you do have to deal with them, you can avoid dealing with it in a poor way, or in a way that may not be optimal for you and your blood sugar. So first things first, supposed to travel all the way across, go from Tampa all the way to LAX, which is a long flight. It's about 6 hours. And I don't know about you, but I can handle about 3 hours on an airplane, maybe 3.5. And then I start to get a little antsy. Like, I'm just like, all right, I'm good. I've sat here. It's been nice. It's been real. It's been fun. Get me there already. So we are supposed to fly. We're supposed to get there. It's going to be late, right? Because I'm 3 hours ahead over here in Florida. We're supposed to get in at, roughly 1 a.m. Florida time. And then I still had an hour-long car ride. But, it should have been reasonable because, getting in around 10 p.m. Pacific, and then an hour, you get there at 11 local time, get to bed by midnight. Not too terrible, right? I had an event the next day. It would be totally fine. Not so fast. So what ends up happening is there's a nasty thunderstorm complete with tornadoes and water spouts and all of the fun things. And it happens, periodically everywhere, right? I remember having water spouts back in the day when I was in college, and I was literally not going to class because there was a water spout in downtown Tampa. That being said, however, it delayed the flight by 2 hours. It delayed every flight. So I'm like, all right, fine. It's weather. It is what it is. I can only do what I can do. However, we then get to the airplane, and it's already 9:15. So I'm like, okay, we're already not going to get there until like 3 a.m. local time. So I'm already going to be exhausted, but that's fine. I can't change it. I'll deal with it. We then get told on the plane that we are waiting for catering because there are not snacks on the airplane. And I don't know about you, but I don't think anyone on that entire godforsaken airplane gave two flying hoots if there were snacks or not at that point, because we just wanted to go. Like, we were sick of waiting. We were sick of getting pushed around, moving from one gate to the next gate, etc. And as all is going on, right, I'm in the airport. I'm watching my blood sugar. I'm not stressed. I'm stressed, but it's not going up. It's trending down because I keep bouncing from one gate to the next gate to the next gate. They keep moving us around. And so I'm, 75, 80. I'm chilling. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. We finally take off. We get into Los Angeles at about 12:45 local time. So it's 3:45 Eastern if you're keeping track at home. I don't think I ended up getting to bed until close to 6 a.m. Eastern. That is obscene. And so as a result of that, I went into this trip very sleep deprived. And in case you're not aware from a diabetes perspective what sleep deprivation can do, summed up in a nutshell, it can make you very insulin resistant, which think about it, right? You're not wanting to move a whole lot because you're downright exhausted, which is normal. It's expected. You're tired. You don't want to just suddenly go out and run 5 miles, right? So skipping the workout, it is what it is. It happened. You couldn't control it. I wasn't going to overdo it. But then keep in mind, you're insulin resistant because of the stress on your body, because you're exhausted. You're also insulin resistant because you don't want to move as much. So I had to force myself to actually go on a walk and move and all of that. So I'm already putting myself at a disadvantage going into an event that I was, it was a conference and I didn't know anybody at the time. So I was a little bit nervous going into it, right? And so that's already going to also put me in a position of cortisol increased insulin resistance. So not a great situation to be in. So thankfully, the conference overall went really well. I was really grateful. But the big thing about it is the middle of it. So at this point, I've made some friends. Everything's great. We're going to go have dinner. It's going to be awesome. I've kind of caught up on sleep, but not particularly because jet lag is a pain and maybe my body just doesn't adapt well. I don't know. But here's what ends up happening. I am 2 days in. Was it 2 days in? Roughly 2 days in. So at this point, I had brought with me, I knew I had one site change for this part of the trip, and then I was supposed to fly across the country to Raleigh to meet Amelia. We were going to go to something else and then, do a site change there. So I was supposed to have 2 site changes while I was gone. I packed 8 sites because I'm that person where I just would rather have too much than too little. I always suggest 2 to 3 times the amount you expect to need. When it comes to Omnipod, they're pretty small. So I figured, I'll pack 8. It'll be fine. Worst case, I bring a bunch home, right? I've had trips where I bring, quadruple what I need. I end up needing the minimum number of sites. Everything's amazing. I put in the first site. I immediately know the site's not good. For me, if it feels like a nasty sting, a nasty burn going in, I know that for the infusion set, I know it's not going to work. I yank the site, blood starts gushing. So that was a good disaster averted situation. Meanwhile, I put in another site. Same situation. I'm like, this is just lovely. And I've had these situations. I've documented this before. You may know if you've been a listener for a while that I have my well-documented site issues. I put in the next site. And remember, I'm trying to do this while I'm also trying to navigate going to dinner with people that I have just met that I'm trying to develop good relationships with. And I'm trying to not rush, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm not dilly-dallying and taking my sweet time. I put in a third site and I don't know, it doesn't really burn, doesn't really sting like crazy going in, but it also didn't feel great. I know when a site feels good, I barely feel it. I'm like, all right, this would be a good site. This one I was kind of questioning. And so I was like, do I take it? Do I change it? And I was like, you know what? I got to get going. I got to get moving. There's people waiting for me. I got to make sure I just go. So I went, and initially I thought my site was doing okay. I had been a little higher during the day because I was, again, sleep deprived, and my number starts making its way down. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm in the 80s. I'm in the 90s. Everything's amazing. I eat dinner. It wasn't anything crazy. There was farro, which if you're not familiar, it's basically a grain type of thing alongside of, I believe it was a pork chop, right? So I'm like, okay, I had some farro. It was, 35 grams of carbs. Nothing wild, nothing crazy. The pork chop didn't have anything crazy in terms of sauces, so I wasn't concerned about that. Lo and behold, I don't know what happened, but suddenly 2 hours later, I look, and it wasn't fat hitting me, because I can tell you that, because there wasn't enough in that pork chop to do it. My blood sugar just starts exploding. I look, and I am legitimately, I shit you not, I am 370. I'm like, what is happening right now? So what happens? I'm like, I dosed before, I've corrected with this, and nothing's working. I yanked the site, and it literally looked like Mount Vesuvius. Blood is just everywhere. So I'm like, lovely, my gut was correct. So your first takeaway is, if you question a site and you are on an insulin pump and you're like, I don't really know, maybe it's working, yank it. At the end of the day, the company will replace the site. The Omnipod people are about to replace a lot of Omnipods for me. But at the end of the day, right, if it's a Tandem, if it's Medtronic, if it's Omnipod, they will replace it. It is better to yank the site than it is to kind of hope and pray that it's going to work and see what happens. I then spent the next 4 hours on the one night that I was hoping I was going to actually be able to get decent sleep. I spent the next 4 hours. I was up until about 1:30 a.m. Pacific. So keep in mind, I'm still jet lagged. So my time clock is all sorts of messed up. I was up until super late, just hoping that it was going to start to come down. And I had put in a new site, and knock on wood, gratefully, that site did work. So I was like, okay, Thank God. We are good. I still have Thursday, Friday. I'm going to change it on Saturday. Sounds great. I'm good for the next few days. And magically, my blood sugars were fine. The next part of the travel day, though, was fun because then I had to fly on 2 flights from some little airport in Southern California to Dallas, connect in Dallas to Raleigh. There was no direct flight. So I'm over here thinking, okay, this will be interesting. This will be fine. Leave the event, get to the airport, get on the plane. And it seems like everything's okay. It seems like, all right, my number's happy. I'm like cruising around 130. Like, I'm not mad about it. I'm flying, like I'm hydrating. Everything should be fine. But then we get to Dallas. And I don't know if you've been to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. It is massive. It is massive and it's very poorly designed. Maybe it's well designed and I just don't know how to do airport design, right? But it's not easy to get from one place to another. For example, in Tampa, it's kind of like spokes on a wheel. You get in one terminal, you got to pop out and you pop into another one. Or if you're, on the same airline, all the American Airlines flights are in one spot. All the Southwest flights are in another spot. You get the general idea. This airport literally tells me when I go on the DFW map, it's like, you will have a 1.8 mile walk to your gate. That should take 28 minutes. And I'm like, I don't have 28 minutes. I have an hour to get from my plane to the next plane when it is supposed to leave, which means the boarding door is already closed. So I have less than an hour. So we land and I have an hour. Tick, tick, tick. Well, the pilot's like, sorry, there's equipment in front of the area we have to go. So because of that, we have to wait. So 10 minutes later. So now I'm like, okay, I'm down to 50 minutes. Then they pull forward and I'm expecting them to say, all right, we're ready to go. Sorry, over the intercom, we pulled too far past the jetway. So we can't let you off the airplane. We have to get pulled back now. 15 minutes later. So I am now down to 35 minutes until the flight takes off, let alone the boarding process is done. So I am very concerned because this airport is absolutely massive. So I get off the plane and I am sprinting. And from a blood sugar standpoint, this has ramifications because there's the possibility of, if I'm truly sprinting all out 100%, I'm probably going to rise, right? Because the glycogen in my liver and my muscle is going to release into the bloodstream. On the flip side, if it's more just like a intensive cardio, but it's at like 70%, which is more like what a sprint through the airport would be, given you're usually carrying bags, that could make my number tank. I was 142 going into my sprint. I got to the gate. I had to get on some trams, run around, get onto the airplane, and huffing and puffing look, and I'm like 104 and I'm dropping. And I'm like, this is delightful. Because again, there's not a whole lot you can do to plan for that situation. So if that happens to you, what can you do about it? Well, the first thing would be, you don't expect the second delay. This is like the classic spontaneity situation. Like, what do you do from a blood sugar standpoint? Because if you were to say, I'm going to eat a low snack for the first delay, that could work, but you may have not needed to run through the airport until the second delay. So in a situation like that, what can you do? What should you do? What I would consider, if your blood sugar is borderline low, like if I was 105, I would have done what I'm about to share. But if I was 105 and they said, we pulled past the jet bridge or jetway or whatever the thing, right? Sorry, we can't let you off the plane yet. And I know it's tick, tick. I'm probably going to be running. I would consider, if you got tabs or candy corn, I would have a few grams of carbs. Because here's the thing. What is the worst situation? Is it worse to end up on a flight? You have to correct your number because you're rising a little bit because you're sitting. Or is it worse to end up low and not even be able to get to your gate? I would pick the former rather than the latter. So having a few grams of carbs, if you were, 110 or so, knowing how much you're about to be sprinting around, that would be something I would highly consider. And again, do you have to do it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it's something you have to think about. Then the other thing would be, I wouldn't touch the insulin because the insulin effect isn't going to impact you for an hour. You don't have an hour. Remember, it was supposed to take off in an hour. So, which naturally did not. But regardless, right? It's one of those situations where you are trying to do your best. And food is always going to act faster than the insulin will. The insulin is more of the long-term player, the moderate-term play. The food is going to be the faster, the upfront, the quicker play. So then, get on to the next flight, sitting there, somehow by the grace of God, managed to get a seat with no one in the middle. So that was great. And the plane was hot as the Sahara. So I am dehydrated like all get out. And remember, when you're at altitude, you're getting dehydrated. And then the plane's hot, so you're dehydrated. And if you're not hydrating, your blood sugar has a tendency to start to rise. And that is naturally what ended up happening. Probably also from some of the stress. But, kind of did a U-turn, started popping up a little bit. 140, 150, not loving it. But then the other thing that happened in this, and this is the bigger part of the situation, is I did make the flight, which I'm grateful for. What I did not make was during that time, I was planning on getting to my gate, spending the 5-10 minutes that I had and scoping out and quickly grabbing something that was food related for dinner. Because remember, I left California. I'm on Pacific time. I'm going to get into Raleigh at 1 in the morning. There's nothing going to be open at that point. So what ends up happening, because of the delay, I didn't get any food. So now I'm also trying to balance not only, oh my God, did I get to the flight, but oh my, I did not have any food. And so the next piece of insight I would suggest in this case is have snacks and have legitimate snacks. Like I had a couple protein bars with me, thank the Lord, and that was able to tide me over. But had I not had that, that could have been a problem. Because also when your body's in a calorie deficit, your insulin sensitivity spikes because your body's like, where's the rest of my food? Let me go grab some glucose. Oh, the bloodstream's a really convenient place, and your number starts to tank, right? So having snacks on you for situations like this, or just for situations where you're hungry and it needs to fit into your nutrition plan, probably a good idea, because you cannot, if you have connecting flights, you cannot and should not count on the ability to have time to scope out food unless your layover is like multiple hours. Multiple hours, different story. But if it is, hey, I'm within an hour, I would not count on the ability to get food. 0%. Like I would just assume you're not going to be able to get food and be prepared otherwise. And of course, what is going to stay good? Nothing other than, shelf stable items. So it's not like I could have got something before the first flight and then gone to the first flight and kept it for the second. Like it would not have stayed, from a food safety standpoint, it would not have stayed good. So the biggest thing that you have to remember, you absolutely have to remember, is if you have a connecting flight, you cannot assume that food is going to be there. So then you're like, Ben, what is happening? Holy smokes. I get there. Gratefully, Amelia had some food for me. I stayed relatively low carb, high protein because it was like 1:30 in the morning. I was starving, but also I knew that I needed to have something in my system. Next day goes fine. Saturday comes around. And so remember at this point, if you're keeping count of my changes for my Omnipods, I have gone through 3 bad sites and I've had 1 good site. So I'm at 4. Let's play a game called How Many Sites Did Ben Go Through to End Up with Another Good Site on Saturday? All right, you've had a chance to think of a number. I had 8 sites going into this trip. I asked Amelia to bring 5 more for me. And for perspective, had I not asked her to bring 5 more, I would have run out of infusion sets. That is how brutal this was. And again, this may have just been an uncharacteristically, absolutely brutal, holy smokes, what is happening? I am just not getting anything going for me from a site perspective. But I legitimately, again, similar situation before, except we were getting an earlier meal. We had someone waiting. I'm like, all right, I got to get this site in. I'm not rushing like crazy, but I'm, taking my time, but I'm trying to act with a little urgency. First site, blood. Second site, blood. Third site, well, it seems okay. Let's run it. And we went to a place and it had waffles because it was part of brunch. I had a waffle, nothing crazy. Like I had just trained legs. Like for me, I train legs. I can typically handle most food pretty well if my site's working. I was in an instant like 310. And this is not like me at all. I feel like someone just slapped me in the face with a 2x4. And so I go back, yank the site, gushing blood. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So then get another site, blood. Get another site, blood. My 6th site of the day finally worked. Finally. It's like, thank the Lord. And gratefully, it was a great site. Thank the Lord, it was an absolutely great site. Again, though, the reason I bring this up is not to hate on Omnipod. I've had the same problem happen with Tandem before. And it's not to be like, don't use a pump. The biggest thing to think of with this is a few things. Number 1, I could have in both situations. I hit into the 300s. I don't usually get to the 300s, and I'm grateful for that. But I felt like absolute trash, and I could have let that absolutely decimate the entire rest of the trip. I could have said, the day's shot, the day's done, F this, I'm done, I hate everything. And instead, I allowed myself to feel the feels, especially the second time around. I was pissed. I was really pissed. But feel the feels, get it out of your system, and then say, okay, what am I going to do now? How am I going to respond to this situation, this adversity, this lousy diabetes situation that I did not ask for? So what did I do? I changed the set. I had already taken an injection because I didn't have a good site, so I didn't want to go even higher. So I had that. So I'm like, okay, I've got some insulin in my system. I've changed the set. I have a good set now. What am I going to do to be able to make sure I can enjoy the rest of the day? And lo and behold, we went on a walk, met up with someone that we know who also has the beatus, and I was back to 80 by the end of the walk, and it was great. It was absolutely amazing. And so the biggest thing I really want to emphasize here is, again, it's all how you respond to it. All these situations happen to all of us at some point. There's situations where you're like, holy cow, my blood sugar is super high, my blood sugar is super low, and this could be really scary. But what you have to remember is this can happen. It's going to happen to all of us at some point. We don't want it to, but it's all about your response to what happens. If you are not responding from a place of, hey, I've got this, you are likely going to set yourself up for a more painful situation. I don't just mean pain from the site going in or pain from the insulin, pain from the injection. I'm talking about pain just psychologically of, holy cow, this is eating my soul and it's terrible. And I don't want that for you. And ultimately, again, gratefully, I was able to get through that, figure it out. Next day was relatively smooth, and then we went from there. But what I have to really emphasize is these days happen, these trips happen to all of us at some point. So don't go in expecting the worst. Hope for the best. Know the best is happening, but have your contingency plan in case things do, hit the fan, and you have to be able to make a move on it quickly. Because if you don't have that backup plan, if you don't have those extra sites, if you don't have that backup insulin pen, that is where things can get wonky. So preparation goes a really long way, but then also in the actual moment, you can't really drill these, right? You can't be like, let's practice. If your blood sugar is terrible and your site just failed, what do you do? Like, you can hypothetically do that, but it's a lot different when it's happening than if you're just quizzing it, right? It's like when you study for a test and you take the test and it's totally different. It feels different. Or like, you're like, oh, I'm going to go train for this race. And you show up on race day and you're all amped up. Same type of thing. So with this, knowing that you have a game plan, you have a backup plan, you've got what you need, but understanding that you are the one who gets to decide how much this is going to impact you and how terrible it's going to be. That is ultimately up to you. And it happens to all of us with diabetes at some point, so you have to be ready for it. Have your backup. I know with that too. I've got your back. My team and I are all dietitians. We've got your back. We all live with type 1. We understand these situations firsthand and how lousy they can be, but we're happy to be here and help support you. So if you're looking for that deeper level of support so you can handle these situations with ease, if they come up, and ideally you're preventing them in the first place, definitely reach out to me on social media, Instagram or TikTok at manofzeel, MANOFTZEEL. And with this too, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're enjoying these anecdotes that are sometimes brutal and they're just like, yeah, he gets me. I understand his pain. He understands me. This is awesome. And you're loving the pod, definitely drop a 5-star review. It would mean the world to me. Share it with a friend, someone who might be able to benefit from it as well. But until next time, I'm here. Let me know what questions you've got. Definitely made it back and grateful for that. But take these nuggets of wisdom, use them on your next trip. I hope that your next trip is way smoother than this, and I'll catch you later.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.